On the day we marked our 7th wedding anniversary, I found a photograph of my wife's stepbrother displayed at the Museum of Broken Relationships. Under the picture was a handwritten message from my wife. "Forgive me for only being able to keep you safe as family in this life." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from my wife read, "My brother is back in the country. Let's celebrate our anniversary another time." I stared at the message and let out a short, hollow laugh. "Julia," I thought, "I warned you when we got married that I was an unbalanced person. You really should not have pushed me." A sudden downpour started as I exited the museum, and I couldn't find an available taxi. My mood was already completely ruined, so I simply began walking, allowing the rain to completely drench me. By the time I arrived at our house, I was absolutely soaked. Julia hadn't returned yet. The nanny had already settled our daughter for the night. I didn't bother turning on any lights, and the enormous house felt strangely silent. Click. The sound of the fingerprint lock opening echoed as Julia came home. I remained still on the sofa. When she flicked on the living room lights, she gasped in surprise. "Why are you sitting here in the dark? And why are you completely wet? Go and dry yourself off immediately." Julia reached for a towel to help me, but I pulled away, avoiding her touch. Realizing that I was upset, Julia sighed and spoke softly. "I apologize. We'll make up for our anniversary. My brother is back, and I absolutely had to go pick him up." "You had to?" I asked, a sneer twisting my mouth. "Julia, you have a lot of nerve." For the sake of the many years we had spent together, I decided to give her one final chance to tell me the truth before I completely lost control. I looked at her with a chilling gaze. "Julia, who exactly is Michael to you? Is he truly your dear brother, or is he your secret lover?" A brief flicker of shock crossed Julia's face before her expression hardened. She angrily threw the towel onto the sofa. "Ethan, what in the world is wrong with you?" It was so obvious. She was reacting way too defensively. Whenever I used to feel jealous of her spending time with male clients, she would simply tease me and say, "Well, you'd better keep a close watch on me then." But now that the man in question was Michael, she completely lost her composure. Julia stood up, struggling to keep her anger in check. "If you have this much spare time, you should be focused on how to make my father happy. He's still waiting for a grandson, you know." Julia, I had given you a chance. You're the one who chose not to take it. Don't hold me responsible for what happens next." The next morning, Julia glanced at the dining table, her expression darkening. "Mrs. Miller, where is my Blue Mountain coffee?" Julia was accustomed to a life of luxury and had very specific tastes. Every morning, she absolutely required her freshly hand-poured Blue Mountain coffee. There was no reply. Julia called out a few more times. "So loud," I said, wiping my mouth as I rose from my seat. "Stop all that shouting. I had Mrs. Miller take Ava to preschool already. I'm driving you to the office today." I dangled Julia's car keys in front of her. "Then what about my breakfast?" I slid a plate of last night's restaurant leftovers toward her. "I had them pack this up from the fancy place yesterday. It was from a very expensive restaurant, after all. Can't let it go to waste. This is your punishment, my dear." Julia's face became rigid, but she clearly knew she was in the wrong and didn't dare to argue. I turned away, a slight, knowing smile on my face. I waited for her inside her Maybach. The very moment Julia's hand touched the car door handle, I quickly slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The car abruptly sped forward. Startled, Julia lost her balance and tumbled onto the ground. In the rearview mirror, I could see her attempting to chase after the car. I reached my hand out the window and gave her a small, casual wave. I glanced at the collection of car keys resting on the passenger seat. She wouldn't be operating any of her vehicles today. It was the absolute peak of the morning commute, so she likely wouldn't be able to catch a taxi either. I had left her an old electric scooter. She's been a spoiled princess for too long. It's about time she experienced how other people live. Julia, the game has just begun. But after taking only a few steps, she hunched over, curling up as she limped back toward the house. I was quite pleased with the effects of the drug I'd given her. Julia must be panicking right now. After all, her precious Michael was already waiting for her at the office. Julia intended for Michael to take my place. Diana from Human Resources told me this. I had personally promoted Diana. She was the most reliable person I had in the company. Once I confirmed the affair, I knew Michael's return wasn't going to be a simple family reunion. I just hadn't anticipated that Julia would be this reckless. What did she honestly think? That I was just going to step aside and accept it? Did she believe that after all these years of living a comfortable life, I was still just the obedient, patient, and devoted husband? 2.5 hours later, Julia finally arrived. I was in my office, leaning back in my chair with my eyes closed. Diana bent down and whispered, "Ethan, Ms. Royce is here. I'm not sure what happened to her today. The back of her dress is soaked, and she's wearing a ridiculous amount of perfume." Her clothes were wet? That must have been perspiration. And the perfume? She was probably trying to mask the scent. As Diana watched in disbelief, I stood up and walked out of my office. Predictably, the very first thing Julia did was eagerly announce Michael's new position. She didn't forget to shoot me a look full of venom. "Starting today, Mr. Michael will be assuming the director's position from Ethan. Let's all give him a warm welcome to the Royce Enterprises family." Julia initiated the applause, but no one else joined in. Bringing in an outsider to lead is a major violation of company culture in any business setting, especially since most of the original company executives had departed years ago, taking a large number of the old staff with them. The people who were here now were mainly recruits I had brought in myself, contacts I had cultivated during my time as a headhunter. They came to Royce Enterprises because they trusted me, so naturally, they were not pleased with this decision. In the absolute silence, my own applause was shockingly loud. Everyone stared at me, unable to figure out what I was doing. "Welcome, Michael, my friend," I said, walking toward him. "But sweetheart, isn't placing him in my specific role a bit of a waste of his talents? Why not simply give him your chair? What do you say, Ms. President?" I clapped as I got closer to Michael, then leaned in and whispered coldly, "How does that sound to you?" Julia frowned, instinctively pulling Michael behind her in a protective gesture. He shot me a look of pure hatred before lowering his head and muttering, "Julia, let's just forget about it. This position isn't the right fit for me." Just 1 hour earlier, Michael hadn't been nearly so compliant. He was lounging in my executive chair, his feet propped up on my desk, taunting me. "Ethan, you're finished here. Get out now while you still have some self-respect." Self-respect? Sorry, but self-respect is the absolute last thing I care about. I walked over to the desk and took off my expensive Rolex watch. I grabbed a handful of Michael's hair and dragged him into the office bathroom. "What are you doing?" Michael yelped in pain. I turned on the faucet, plugged the drain, and forcefully shoved his face into the rapidly rising water. He struggled wildly, trying to break free. I watched his panicked, distorted face with cold satisfaction. "Telling me to leave? Who the hell do you think you are?" I yanked his head up by the hair. His face was bright red, his black eyeliner smeared like a ghost's makeup as he desperately gasped for air. "Ethan!" he screamed, furious. I pushed his head back under the water again and again. When I finally let him go, he was shaking uncontrollably, clutching the sink in terror. Ethan, Julia won't let you get away with this." I laughed dismissively and leaned in to pat his cheek. You want my job? Go ahead, try to take it. I dare you. See if I don't stick your head in the toilet next. Michael immediately recoiled, his face a mask of fear as he wildly shook his head. I wiped my hands, then forcibly ripped a watch off his wrist and tossed it into the trash can. Leo, you're a lunatic. Julia gave this to you, right? I'm confiscating it. It's marital property. I had been at the jeweler a few days earlier to pick up a watch, and the saleswoman mentioned Julia had ordered a new green Submariner. I had waited and waited, but I never expected she'd given it to this loser. I lifted Michael's chin and flicked him on the forehead. And you were right about one thing. I am insane. Michael's face crumpled up, but he didn't dare utter another single word. Michael's welcome meeting was a complete disaster. Julia sweetly asked her assistant to escort Michael out. The next second, she stormed into my office to confront me. Ethan, what was the meaning of all that? This company's name is Royce. What I choose to do here is none of your damn business. I shrugged casually, took a sip of the Blue Mountain coffee I'd made, and went back to looking at my documents. Julia completely lost it. She swept the papers off my desk, her anger instantly flaring up. One after another, they are all so disobedient. I picked up my coffee cup and flicked my wrist, splashing the coffee. Weren't you desperate for some coffee? Here you go. Ethan! Julia was absolutely enraged, but remembering they were at the office, she lowered her voice. The office walls were made of glass. Julia quickly wiped her face and rushed to pull the blinds shut. Just like her father, she can't stand to lose face. She cares more about appearances than anything else. I could practically hear her grinding her teeth. Ethan, what the hell are you planning? I took out a tissue and calmly wiped the coffee off a document. Such a pity. Now I'll have to print it all over again. I'm not happy about you and Michael. What are you going to do about it? Julia glanced at the blinds and hissed, I'll deal with you when we get home. Michael didn't have many real skills, but he certainly had a big mouth. As soon as I left work, I received a phone call from my father-in-law telling me to come to the family estate. I was curious to see what they had planned. At the estate, Michael and his mother, Diana, were sitting next to my father-in-law, looking like they were ready to watch me get what I deserved. Father, what's going on? A string of sandalwood prayer beads landed right at my feet. What do you think the company is? A place for you to throw a tantrum whenever you feel like it? You've disgraced the entire Royce family. My father-in-law was a very traditional man. The two things he valued most in this world were his reputation and having a male heir. With him around, there was no way Michael and Julia could ever openly be together. And me? I was merely a tool for Julia to maintain a respectable life. I had never been able to understand why a wealthy heiress like Julia would fall for an orphan like me, even going against her family's wishes to be with me. Now, I finally understood. An orphan has no family, no support system. I couldn't cause any major issues. Even if she was caught, what could I really do? I looked at Michael and gave him a cold, hard smile. It made him shiver, and he tugged on Diana's sleeve. What are you staring at? A man with no parents is a man with no manners. Honey, Ethan is already this arrogant. Imagine what he'll be like in the future. He'll be walking all over Julia. I don't believe he has any respect for the Royce family at all. Diana fanned the flames while my father-in-law's face grew darker. Michael smirked. George, bring me the cane. I cracked my knuckles and began walking toward them. Just as I was about to go completely berserk, someone called out, Daddy! Ava's bright voice rang out as she wrapped her arms around my leg. Ava? What are you doing here?" My angry expression instantly softened, and I gently patted her head. Julia had brought her along. "Ava, come give your uncle a hug." Michael picked up my daughter, kissing and touching her. It took everything I had not to violently chop off his hands. "Ava, wouldn't you like Mommy to give you a little brother?" At that question, my father-in-law's expression eased slightly. "Ava is already 6, he said grimly. "When are you two going to have a second child?" "Ask him," Julia said, not defending me and throwing me under the bus instead. Hilarious, as if her frail body could handle another pregnancy. Ava was a child prone to insecurity, always worrying that if I had a son, I wouldn't love her anymore. Now Ava was on the verge of tears. These people were doing this deliberately, weren't they? Taking advantage of the fact that I wouldn't lose my temper in front of my daughter. Go to hell, I thought. Just you wait. I picked up Ava and walked toward the door. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Julia tried to stop me, but I shoved her aside. "Ethan! Ethan!" I completely ignored them, no matter how much they shouted. 20 minutes later, Alex picked up Ava from me. I turned around, walked back toward the Royce estate, and grabbed a bottle of weed killer from the garden shed on my way. Don't blame me. You forced me to do this. That day, I gave the entire family a nice, thorough shower with weed killer. Watching them scatter like frightened rats was immensely satisfying. That's right. In their eyes, Ava and I were never truly a part of the family. The daughter-in-law from a lowly background wasn't worthy of joining the high and mighty Royce clan. The unloved granddaughter never received her grandfather's affection. On New Year's Eve, they would sit around, laughing and enjoying themselves. I would hold Ava, watching the fireworks outside, while I gently rocked her to sleep. Ava once asked me, "Daddy, does Grandpa not like me?" "Of course not," I had said. "Grandpa's just used to looking serious." Back then, I foolishly thought that if I just raised Ava to be exceptional enough, they would eventually change their minds. I'm sorry, Ava. Daddy was wrong. People who don't like you will never like you, no matter what you do. Just like me. After all these years, I'm still not worth a single hair on Michael's head. It doesn't matter. From today on, I'll prepare everything for Ava. I'll take back everything that should have rightfully been ours. After I taught them a lesson, the Royces didn't dare to provoke me again. Julia moved out of the house, which suited me just fine. Even if she hadn't left, I would have kicked her out. After all, I considered her contaminated. A divorce was definitely going to happen, but not before I secured my money. In the first week, I thoroughly audited the company's financial records. I discovered several inconsistencies in the accounts going back years. The money had been transferred to an overseas account. It either ended up in Michael's pocket, or Julia was trying to move assets. There was another possibility. Julia was planning to start her own company. I understood instantly. No wonder Royce Enterprises had been struggling for the past few years, yet Julia wasn't the least bit concerned. She never intended to take over the company from her father. Once she established her own power base, her father would no longer have any leverage over her, and there would be nothing standing in the way of her and Michael. Ava and I would simply be discarded. Julia, oh Julia, you would even conspire against your own father just to be with Michael. The game just got a lot more interesting. Don't worry, I'm going to completely flip the script. I am not a man who enjoys wasting time. I prefer the simplest, most brutal methods to achieve my goals. I took the entire story straight to Mr. Royce. I didn't spare his feelings, laying out all the evidence one piece at a time. Julia's ambition, Julia and Michael. Diana was so terrified that she hid in the kitchen, not daring to come out. Arthur Royce's face fell, the wrinkles around his mouth drooping severely. He took several deep, shaky breaths. I was momentarily concerned he might have a heart attack and die right there, which would have been no fun at all. Finally, he forced out a single sentence. "What do you want?" Spoken like a true Royce. His own daughter messes everything up, and he turns around and asks me what I want. Diana came out, trembling, and said placatingly, "Honey, Julia and Michael, they just made a mistake." Arthur backhanded her across the face. "Get out! Look at the fine son you raised!" He put all his strength into that slap. Diana fell to the floor, clutching her face, tears in her eyes, but not daring to speak. "My demands are simple. Get back the assets Julia transferred," I stated. "Then we get a divorce, and I want her to walk away with nothing." Arthur laughed, as if he'd heard the most absurd thing. "Ethan, you've got a lot of nerve." "What? You don't agree? Then just wait while I slowly destroy all of you." "Ethan, a man should have some generosity. Just let this go. The wise man knows when to yield." "Pah." I spat a mouthful of tea leaves right in his face. "You're the one who doesn't know when to yield." Once everything was out in the open, Julia and Michael stopped hiding. To keep Michael by her side, she fired her secretary of 10 years, simply because he was a man and she was afraid Michael would get jealous. Then she and Michael started carpooling to work every day, separating in the parking garage before coming up to the office. They were clearly getting off on the thrill of it all. "Whatever. I'll just go completely crazy. If Michael went to Julia's office to be lovey-dovey, I'd storm in and slap him a couple of times to remind him of his place. If Julia waited for Michael in the parking lot after work, I'd deliberately keep Michael late, making him brew my coffee and organize my files. If I ran into Michael in the men's room, I'd lock him in a stall, sending Julia into such a panic she almost charged into the men's room herself. If either of them dared to say a single word against me, I'd just start shouting, 'Homewrecker!' and they'd immediately shut up. Within 1 week, Michael had vanished from the company, but I never expected his second return would bring me such a significant surprise. The company had just successfully closed a major project, and as usual, Julia and I took the employees out to celebrate. The lights were low, the place buzzing with noise. I twisted my wedding ring, savoring the burn of the alcohol. I could feel Julia tense up beside me, and I couldn't help but laugh inwardly. After playing the part of a loving couple for so many years, the moment Michael came back, she couldn't even pretend anymore. Julia was on edge all night, constantly checking her phone. The sofa cushion bounced as she suddenly shot up and quickly walked away. Around the corner, I saw a hand pull her into a side room. I stood up silently and followed them. Through the door, I couldn't make out their whispered conversation. Then, I heard a few muffled moans from Julia. I knew that sound well. It was her in a state of excitement. The noises grew more and more explicit. A few passers-by stopped to watch the unfolding show, but my cold glare sent them running. The mirror on the wall reflected my dark expression. I thought I was long past caring, but the bloody scratches my fingernails left on my own skin told me otherwise. "Ethan, you can still feel pain." "You don't know this, Julia, but at the orphanage they used to call me the psycho. The meager donations we received weren't enough to support all of us. The older kids who didn't get enough to eat would steal from the younger ones. One time, 2 older boys dragged me into a supply closet. They took my food, and I lunged at one of them, sinking my teeth into his arm. He screamed in pain, but I wasn't much better off. One of them pulled my hair, while the other kicked and punched me. It hurt. Everything inside me ached terribly. But I knew I couldn't let go. I couldn't let them think I was weak. By the time they found us and pulled us apart, a patch of my scalp was torn out, and I was diagnosed with a mild concussion. I had nearly torn a chunk of flesh from the other boy's arm, leaving a permanent mangled scar. He cried his eyes out. But me? I held back every single tear. After that, I grew up in peace at the orphanage, until I met Julia. She was gentle, kind, and graceful. After I initially rejected her, she would quietly wait for me on my way home from my part-time job every day, never getting too close, never bothering me. Later, she shed her princess persona and started working with me at the greasy Spoon Diner. Her designer clothes got stained with grease and grime. She was a rich girl, after all, clumsy and completely clueless about real work. When she first started, she was always breaking plates. The boss wanted to fire her several times, but he couldn't resist the fact that her pretty face was drawing in a crowd of young guys, which boosted business. So the boss just told me to help her out more. She used her softness to pull out all my sharp edges. I thought she was my salvation. I never imagined she was just pushing me into another abyss. I'm completely miserable, and they are not getting off easy. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the corner and slammed it against the door. A moment later, Julia emerged, her clothes disheveled, still breathing heavily. After a few seconds, Michael came out too. He made no effort to hide the love bites on his neck, as if showing them off to me. My hand gently caressed his neck. Michael flinched, goosebumps rising on his skin. Julia stood to the side, looking guilty. I curled my fingers, digging my nails into his flesh. Michael screamed. I dragged my nails down his skin, leaving a raw, bloody track. You won't escape the pain I've been through. Julia tried to grab me, but I stopped her with a single warning. If you don't want me to release the recording I just made, you won't touch me. Julia was such a coward. She just stood there and watched me torment Michael. Just like how her father Arthur had humiliated Diana right in front of me, Julia had inherited all of her father's selfishness and false pride. Before I left, I circled back for one last blow. I took the pin from my hair and sliced a hole in the back of Michael's pants, right over his rear end. He scrambled into the bathroom, yelling for Julia to buy him new pants. The sight of him frantically trying to pull up his trousers was so ridiculous, it swept away all my gloom. I walked out from around the corner, clapping and laughing. A colleague asked me what was so funny. Nothing, I said. Just saw something hilarious. By the time Julia returned to her seat, we were playing Truth or Dare. I drew a dare card. It said, "Kiss a woman in the room." A chorus of suggestive cheers erupted. Julia gave me a deep look, a look of smug certainty that was absolutely disgusting. I lifted my chin and looked at the intern across the table, who was busy on her phone. "Diana," I said, "how about you give your big brother a kiss?" The atmosphere shifted instantly. No one dared to cheer anymore. Julia stared at me in disbelief. She grabbed my wrist, threw a credit card on the table, and pulled me to my feet. "Ethan was just joking," she announced. "We have to leave. You all enjoy yourselves." Once we were a good distance from the bar, I yanked my hand away. "Let go. You're contaminated." Julia put her hands on her hips, her chest heaving as she paced back and forth. "Ethan, what the hell is your problem? Talk to me." I cleaned out my ear, then reached into her pocket and pulled out her cigarettes and a box of matches. Lighting a cigarette with a match was her long-standing habit. I blew a smoke ring right in her face. "My problem?" Julia shoved me hard. "You're a psycho!" she screamed. "I'm giving you 1 week to put the money back. Otherwise, you'll see just how much crazier I can get." I dragged my completely exhausted body home. In the dead of night, I heard a faint cry and sprinted upstairs. Ava was curled up under the covers, tears on her face. She must have had a bad dream. I gently patted her back. She suddenly opened her eyes and whimpered, "Daddy." I turned on the nightlight, but Ava only cried harder. She took my hand, saw the scratches and started blowing on them gently, asking between sobs, "Daddy, does it hurt?" I stroked her head. "Don't cry, baby. Daddy doesn't feel a thing. Daddy, I don't want Mommy anymore. Please don't get hurt again, okay?" It was like a physical punch to the gut. My mind went blank, and my hand froze. I pulled Ava into a fierce hug as tears streamed down my face. How could this be? My Ava. She knew everything. I fought hard to control my emotions. "Ava," I asked, "who told you that?" "Uncle Michael said you and Mommy are getting a divorce." Sniffle. "Daddy, I'm so scared." Harming my daughter was like plunging a knife into my own heart. "Michael, you just wait." After I got Ava back to sleep, I collapsed onto the sofa, completely unable to move. Cold moonlight streamed through the window. Just a few months ago, this house was filled with laughter. Every morning, Julia would tie my tie, and I'd kiss her on the forehead. Ava would cling to Julia, begging to be carried downstairs. At the breakfast table, Ava would chatter away while Julia and I exchanged helpless but loving glances. Warm milk, yogurt with oats, and Blue Mountain coffee, all in our matching family mugs. The daughter, daddy, and mommy patterns all lined up in a row. How did it all come to this? Arthur told me to understand my low status. Julia said all women in her social circle are like this. Even the director of the orphanage advised me, "You're an orphan. It wasn't easy for you to get this far. Just accept it." Yeah, it wasn't easy at all. That's precisely why I'll take everything, except Julia. On the last day of the 1-week deadline, I didn't receive confirmation that Julia had returned the money. Instead, the nanny told me Julia had picked up Ava. "Julia, where is Ava?" I grabbed her by the collar, demanding an immediate answer. Julia calmly pried my hands off. "Given your current mental state," she said coolly, "I have serious doubts about your ability to care for Ava. Do you have any idea how close I am to killing you? I believe you, but you'll never see Ava again." Ha! Julia using your own daughter as a bargaining chip? That's all you've got, isn't it? If you want to see Ava, follow me. I followed Julia to the underground garage. In a brief moment, I sent a text to my assistant, Alex. "Go to the Royce estate. The files are in the left drawer of my office desk." Julia drove me to the love nest she shared with Michael. Michael was sitting on the sofa, eating cherries and spitting the pits in my direction. Julia walked over to him, and he stood up to wrap his arm around her waist. "You're the best, babe," he teased. Uncharacteristically, Julia ignored him, pushing his hand away and sitting on the sofa. She pinched the bridge of her nose, looking utterly exhausted. "I brought him here for you. Now, stop causing trouble. Whatever he did to you before, you can pay him back today." And Michael did. He slapped me and pushed my head into the sink full of water. Julia didn't react. She just sat there with her eyes closed, escaping. As if by not looking, it wasn't truly happening. Michael was gloating. "Ethan, know your place. You'll never be worth a single hair on my head." For Ava, I had to endure it. Thankfully, the pain didn't last long. Arthur Royce burst through the door with his security men. "Julia, you ungrateful daughter! Michael, what in God's name are you doing?" Arthur roared. Michael froze. Julia shot to her feet. Both of them were stunned. A few minutes later, my stepmother-in-law, Diana, was draping a blanket over me and respectfully feeding me bird's nest soup. Julia and Michael were kneeling on the floor. "Look at what you two have done. Did you really think I was dead? If anything happens to my granddaughter, I'll never forgive you." "Dad, what are you talking about? Don't you know Ethan is sick?" "Yes, That was the file I'd had Alex deliver. Julia's eyes widened as she looked at me. Why didn't you say anything? She looked down, her voice low. I'm sorry. If I had known, I wouldn't have. I snatched the soup from her and threw it onto Julia. If sorry fixed everything, what would we need the police for? Ethan, I know what you're trying to do. You called me here so I would take your side. You two are to cut off all contact immediately. Arthur slammed his cane into Julia's back. Her face went white with pain. That's not enough. I have 2 more demands. First, all the assets Julia transferred will be moved to my personal account for me to manage. Second, from now on, no one is to take Ava anywhere without my explicit permission. Julia's wings weren't fully grown yet. She still had to rely on her father's authority to maintain her position. Besides, she really did want her daughter back. Julia agreed to everything. I propped up my chin and jutted my lip out slightly. But I'm still not happy. When a man is sick, his bad mood probably affects his recovery, right? I feigned a look of distress, my eyes landing directly on Michael. Unexpectedly, Diana, who was standing beside me, rushed forward and slapped Michael across the face. Michael, you've disappointed your uncle and me so much. Julia's heart broke for him. She wanted to protect him but was too afraid of me to move. But Diana's slap wasn't for nothing. When Arthur looked at her, there was a newfound approval in his eyes, a strategic retreat. Arthur must have thought Diana was a woman who understood the bigger picture. It seems there was a reason Diana, a former dancer, was able to marry Arthur and bring Michael into the family. At the very least, she understood her husband's temperament perfectly. Michael, compared to your mother, you're pathetic. And you, Julia, if you had half your father's brains, you wouldn't have let this guy play you for a fool. The assets Julia had siphoned off finally made their way into my account after a long and winding journey. At Arthur's request, I took a temporary leave from the company to rest and recover at home. Before I left, I took a file from the safe. I once thought I would keep this secret buried forever. Looking back now, maybe it was all part of a larger, unavoidable plan. During my leave, Julia came to see me once. She didn't look well. The exhaustion was etched deep into her face. With no one to style her, her clothes were strange and ill-fitting, lacking any of her former flair. She said, "Ethan, can we please stop fighting? Peter and I are completely over. Please don't give him a hard time anymore. He had a tough life growing up with his mom. Even after he came to our family, he was always so careful. I used to tease him, but he never told on me. He'd even cover for me when I got into trouble. Enough. I have no interest in hearing your love story. My terms are the same. We get a divorce, and you walk away with nothing." Julia's eyes narrowed. "Ethan, that's impossible." "Then we have nothing more to talk about." I turned to leave, but Julia wrapped her arms around me. The difference in physical strength between a man and a woman was simply too great. I gave up struggling. Her voice choked with tears. "Lately, I just feel like something's missing. I feel so empty inside." That afternoon, Lynn, the secretary Julia had fired, brought me what I needed. I handed him a check. "You've worked hard all these years. Royce Enterprises did you wrong. I've written you a strong letter of recommendation. I wish you all the best for your future." Even though everything was almost settled, I still had a nagging feeling of unease. I felt like something big was about to happen. I was sunbathing in the yard the day Diana and Michael showed up at my door. The mother and son stood before me, arrogant and smug, with a woman behind them carrying bags of their things. Diana was all smiles, but there was an icy chill to her. Like a snake flicking its tongue, it sent a shiver down my spine. "Ethan, dear, Your father sent me to take care of you. Now that you and Michael are both sick, your father is worried. Yes, this is perfect. The two of them stared at me, bewildered. Ethan, do you truly think being sick means you've won? Julia loves me. She only married you because you were easy to manage. Diana really did have some skills to have convinced Arthur of this. How interesting. Hey, bro, you're sick? Then why are you standing? You should sit down and rest. Don't wear yourself out. I dialed Alex's number. Alex, get Mr. Royce and Ms. Royce over here for me. Tell them if they don't come, they can get ready to collect some bodies. I clapped my hands, and several large dogs came running from the backyard, barking furiously at Michael and Diana. The two of them instantly fell to the ground in terror. Sorry about that. As long as you two behave, they only bite people, not other dogs. Julia and Arthur arrived at almost the same time. Julia had come in such a hurry that her hair was a complete mess. I shrugged. He says he's sick, too. What are we going to do? Julia tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. Ethan, let me explain. Ethan, a man needs to look at the big picture. I promise you, once the child is better, I'll give you custody. Just stop this. Hilarious. This was just too hilarious. I laughed so hard I doubled over, tears streaming down my face. Ethan, don't be like this. Acting all crazy, what kind of behavior is that? Still laughing, I clapped my hands, went inside and brought out a file, which I tossed to Julia. Julia, for the past few years, you've been taking business trips abroad every month. You were really going to see Michael, weren't you? Did you know your body was already breaking down? This is your medical report from a year ago. Take a look for yourself and see if you can still produce a grandson. And as for me, I'm not sick at all. Julia's hands trembled as she opened the file. The next second, she lunged at Michael like a wild animal. She wrapped her hands around his throat, her eyes wide with fury. I gave you everything, and you betrayed me, she roared, shoving him away. Michael clutched his neck, gasping for air. Julia stormed out. Arthur raised his cane, about to strike Michael. What have I done to deserve this? What have I done? But the shock was too much. He clutched his chest and was caught by Diana as he fell. Honey, are you okay? Honey, this was all Michael's doing. I didn't know. I didn't know. Spectacular. Truly spectacular. I'll never forget this masterpiece of a high society soap opera. Diana fumbled to call 911, while Michael crawled to her side, begging her not to abandon him. I turned, went back into the house, and shut the door, blocking out the complete chaos. I was hoping to get some rest while it was still early, but then I got a call from the hospital, informing me that Julia had been in a car accident. Mr. Nash, Ms. Royce is currently in emergency surgery. Her uterus was severely damaged. We need the family's consent. The person on the other end asked if I wanted to try and save it. I said, no, don't bother. Didn't you say the situation was urgent? What are you waiting for? Just cut it out. After hanging up, I went to the hospital to see Julia. The doctor said she also had nerve damage in her brain and might never be able to speak normally again. Seeing the woman I once loved deeply lying in the ICU, covered in tubes, I can't really describe the feeling. Arthur had also collapsed. He'd suffered a stroke. With a crooked mouth, he slurred, Where did you hide Ava? Arthur, I'm here today to make a deal. You transfer all of your shares to me, and I'll take over Royce Enterprises from now on. I promise to take care of you in your old age and pay for Julia's medical treatment. If you don't agree, I'll release evidence of Julia's professional misconduct, and we'll let the board of directors decide everything. If you agree, hold out your hand, and I'll give you the ink pad to stamp the papers. Arthur closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. After a long moment, he held out his hand covered in age spots. In that instant, he seemed to have lost all the bravado of the business titan he once was. Now he was just a helpless old man. It was all over. As for Diana and her son, Arthur had kicked them out long ago. The two of them went around town spreading the Royce family's dirty laundry, and the reputation the family cherished so much was finally dragged through the mud. Of course, all this high society gossip created some serious trouble for Royce Enterprises. I had to pull several all-nighters to clean up the mess. But before I even had to lift a finger, Rachel's husband took care of the mother and son for me. That young man was far more ruthless than me. I heard that Michael had some of his parts removed. After that, I never heard from them again. The days that followed were busy, but whenever I had free time, I would take Ava to the orphanage to do charity work. I donated a lot of money to the orphanage, and even built a new one. I held Ava's hand as we walked out of the orphanage. The evening sun cast a warm glow on the children's faces. They were smiling so happily, so much more innocent than I was at their age. If I could, I truly wish this world would have no more people like me. Behind the madness is a world of sorrow. Life never left me any way to retreat.